A lot of the filming on this channel is done with the Osmo Pocket 3, and I've never really thought about using it as a camera to take photos with. So in this video, we're going to hit the streets and see how effective this little gimbal camera is at taking street photos. Let's get into it. If you follow my channel, then you probably know that I have to have a camera mounted on a selfie stick in order to shoot photos, as I cannot hold the camera up without one and also physically press the shutter button. However, when using the Osmo Pocket 3, I have been walking around crying tears of joy whilst capturing people. Crying and taking photos is not the stealthiest look for street photography, I know, but this is basically a camera on a stick. The beauty of shooting with this little gimbal is that you don't have to hold it upright. You can also hold it flat in a horizontal position, and the camera head, because it's on the gimbal, it still remains level. This means you can still get shots from a low angle without hardly moving your body at all. I had the camera in tilt lock mode the whole time I took photos, and I put the Osmo Pocket into Pro mode, which meant that I could have full control over the shutter speed and the ISO settings. I shot in auto white balance and JPEG plus RAW format with single shooting focus mode. For nighttime shooting, my shutter speed is 1/100 seconds and the ISO is 50 to 6400. The most amazing thing about this camera is that every single shot was in focus. Every subject that I shot was captured without any blur whatsoever, and it focused on its own. I must have touched the touchscreen to focus about 5 times during the 2 days of shooting. This even surpassed my Ricoh camera's hit rate and also my Sony a7R III. However, there are just a few downsides that I will get into later. But on the whole, it was a fantastic street photography experience. If you stick around, you're going to get to watch a bonus daytime street photography shoot with the Osmo Pocket 3 that takes place in a special location on the south coast English seafront. Plus, I will show you how easy it is to edit these 9.4 megapixel shots in Lightroom. So this little camera has a fixed f2 aperture. It also has a 1-inch sensor which has a 2.7 times crop factor. As you can see, people are captured without any issues. One of the things that I'm not too pleased about is the way it renders light sources with the streak of light emanating from the street lamps. I'm sure that changing settings on a camera body is a breeze for most people, but not for me. However, with this camera, I can change aspect ratios and the zoom, which I can zoom in by 2 in a matter of seconds just by touching the screen. I love the details captured by this 1-inch sensor. One thing I noticed is that when you move, the camera moves, so you have to use the joystick to recenter the camera. It can be annoying, but you get used to it after a while. This poke bowl restaurant is new. I ought to go in and thank them for putting in atmospheric lighting. So the lens is a 20mm equivalent focal length, which is extremely wide. This is why I spent most of my time shooting in a 1:1 aspect ratio rather than 16:9. I've been wondering why there isn't a 4:3 aspect ratio. If you've seen my previous videos, you know I've been here before. As you can see, it was extremely dark, but capturing this castle in this level of low light is just incredible. Perhaps it was too dark to shoot on Mermaid Street, so I thought I'd go for a completely unique angle. Obviously, it's not a photography camera, so another downside is the buffer. It's not blazingly fast, so you have to wait to take a repeat shot, which means you might miss a certain movement or action. I wonder if putting in a burst mode would be a step too far when you have all of these great video modes in this little gimbal camera. It's only 179 grams, which according to Wikipedia is lighter than the lightest on the list, which was the Samsung NX Mini at a mere 196 grams. But the Osmo is stabilized, which if you think about it is incredible. I was also quite pleased at the lack of noise. I only added a touch of luminance reduction in Lightroom, but I don't even think I needed to do that. Because it is ultra wide, there is a certain amount of distortion. However, it actually makes leading lines look great. I just thought I'd capture this handsome fella in the window here. Back to the scene of my previous video crimes. This ancient alleyway is supposed to be haunted. If I'd actually seen a ghost, it would have made my night. This is one of my favourite shots of the evening. The condensation on this window was just pure vibes. I loved it so much I had to take it twice. So as you can see, it works beautifully at night. I didn't want to use the snow mist filter that I got as part of my filter collection because I wanted to see how the bare bones camera rendered light sources. One of the not so great aspects of the shoot. But nevertheless, in my opinion, the photos still came out great, considering this DJI camera is actually video equipment and doesn't even look like a traditional camera. I will definitely try out the snow filter at a later date. So the settings for the daytime shooting were also putting the Osmo Pocket into Pro mode, which meant that I could have control over the shutter speed and the ISO. I also shot in auto white balance, RAW plus JPEG. I put the Osmo Pocket 3 through its paces. I tried both focus modes. This time I used continuous autofocus, and there was a tilt lock on the gimbal. This time I changed the shutter speed to 1/200th of a second, but because I knew I was going to be shooting in a partially covered location, I kept the same ISO settings as before. I also put a 4-stop ND16 on the lens, and once again every subject was in sharp focus. This is Bottle Alley in St Leonards-on-Sea. It's called Bottle Alley because there are loads of shards of glass bottles in the alley wall. It bears a similarity to the Barbican in that it's a covered walkway and the light enters from one side, so I thought this would be an interesting place to shoot, seeing as there was just bad light that day. Plus it was drizzly and I didn't want to get this non-waterproof camera wet. I said it before, but one of the great things about using this camera is that you can use it horizontally, which is why you can't see the camera in many of the clips in this daytime section, as I was shooting from the hip. As I said in the settings, I had to use a 4-stop ND16 on the camera. However, I found that the Osmo Pocket still struggled with the dynamic range from the light coming into the alley, so if I came back again with this camera I would just increase the shutter speed. By the way, if you're interested, the ND filters are made by a company called Freewell. I noticed that a bunch of the shots were blown out in Lightroom, but when I decreased the highlights, I managed to recover the skies. It's almost impossible to see where your exposure is at on this little screen, and there's no highlight clipping warning indicator, unfortunately. So my advice is, if you're going out to shoot in the daytime, be very careful with your settings and definitely buy ND filters because you won't be able to shoot without them. Obviously, the wide aperture of f2 just doesn't help, but I guess you can't have everything. If there are puddles on the ground, you can get some great reflection shots by crouching down with the camera. So editing these 9.4 megapixel shots are just like editing any photo. Because I had little time as I was making a video, I used one of my presets. I think in this photo the highlights need reducing slightly. Controversial, I know, but I actually want to increase the clarity here. Let's tone down the colours a bit with the vibrance slider and add a little luminance noise reduction. Obviously, with a 9.4 megapixel shot, when you zoom in, you're going to get noise, especially at night, but it's to be expected. I could easily share a few of these images on Instagram or Twitter, but I wouldn't be printing them. This shoot was just an experiment. Finally, we'll just increase the masking slider on the sharpening. And there it is. I hope that you can now see the possibilities of shooting with the Osmo Pocket 3. I was very surprised with the performance of this little camera. The negative points were thankfully only a few. It's not as fast at grabbing repeat shots as a traditional camera. It could do with a tilt screen, and it's a fragile little thing. I wouldn't bet on it being fully functional if you dropped it in the streets. It also doesn't render the light from street lamps particularly well, but it would be interesting to see if mist filters can fix that to any degree. And finally, it's no big deal, but you need to use ND filters in the daytime. The plus points make this little gimbal shine though. perfect focused every time, great low light photography capabilities that renders surprisingly good detail for a 1-inch sensor. It's easy to access and change settings, and it's also light as a feather. Just for reference, the Osmo Pocket 3 is mine. This is not a sponsored video at all. Anyway, if you made it this far, then thank you. If you want to grab my night street photography settings to use in your own camera, then check out this video here. Until we meet again, go forth and create.